This is a lightning talk I gave at SWmobile, a meetup of mobile developers in Bristol in June of 2015. I recorded the audio on the night, but technical gremlins meant that I lost it, so this has been lovingly recreated for you at home. Hello, my name is Chris and I am not a developer. I am in fact a writer, I'm a journalist, and yet I have the temerity to stand up in front of a group of developers and tell you how to do your job. What gives me the right to do that? What possible justification can I have for doing that? Well, I'll present you with my credentials and you can make up your own mind. Number one is that I have written an application. Admittedly, it was when I was 12 and it was written in BASIC, and it was itself very basic. All it was something that took the directory listing command and put a vaguely pretty interface on it. But since that seems to me to be in the grand tradition of development, just taking APIs and libraries and just making them look a bit pretty, then I think that qualifies me. But more seriously, the thing that I write about is technology. I'm a technology journalist and I've been working in this field for 12, 13 years, writing about all sorts of things, but primarily writing about Apple, which is why the examples that I'll give tonight are from the world of Apple. That's not to say, hopefully, that you won't be able to understand that the points that I'm making are applicable more broadly to anything at all. But just since Apple tends to be the focus of my work, that's where most of my examples are drawn from. All right, so let's begin. This is the problem as I see it with the current crop of hardware and software in today's landscape, today's market. And I want to present you with a challenge to think about changing this prevailing fashion. If we look at this, the current lineup of Apple's hardware, no one would doubt that they look beautiful, they look powerful, but they also to me look a little unfriendly, a little austere, maybe a little forbidding and inscrutable and difficult to get a handle on. It used to be the case that technology was much friendlier and easier and much more intuitive to understand. And if you look at the trends in software design as well, if we look at the flat design aesthetic, you look at the material design aesthetic for Android, then it has dispensed with a lot of the playfulness and the personality that pervaded, especially software design, in the early days of computing. And I want to make you think, not necessarily to do this, but I want to make you think about how that role of personality and playfulness can come back into the products that you're working on today. Now, I'm aware that when I talk about personality and playfulness, this is the sort of thing that comes to mind. This, of course, is Clippy from Microsoft Office, which, we can all agree was an appalling idea. It added personality at a point where it wasn't appropriate, because although not always and absolutely the case, usually when you're using Office, you're using it to do productive work. You're trying to be serious in your business, and this wacky little character scudding onto screen actually just irritated more than it helped, and it was an inappropriate use of personality in product design. So that's not the sort of thing we're talking about, and nor are we talking about this sort of thing. This is the error message you get in Chrome when something goes wrong. You get this little pixel sad face and then the chirpy snap message coming up as well, and that just irritates the tits off me. It really annoys me, because that usually comes at a point in your working life where you do not want personality, you don't want flippant personality. Because if I'm working in my Chromebook, for example, and it crashes and I lose work and I'm presented with this, it just makes me annoyed. So let's look at an example of what we are talking about. And this one comes from the pre-OS 10 days of Apple. This is the page setup dialog box you would get. And the thing that I want to draw your attention to particularly is the little character at the left-hand side of the screen, the thing showing what looks a bit like a dog, it looks a bit like a cow. It's actually called Claros, and it's Claris the dog cow. And the role that Claris is playing here, is just to show you how your document will look on the page as you print it out. We're pretty familiar these days with the idea of portrait and landscape, and even though obviously these terms don't come, they come from painting, which has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, they're slightly unfamiliar ideas. So showing it pictographically makes sense. And then if you click on the landscape, then you see the page change and you see Claris taking place. Now, obviously the way you could do this is to have, a capital A or something. That would be the Microsoft way of doing things, wouldn't it? The sort of PC-ish way of doing things. But we instead have got Claris. And Claris, the history of Claris is quite interesting. She came about, she was part of a bitmap font, a sort of dingbat font originally designed for the Mac, and she just sort of wormed her way in, just hung around for a while. But the point is that it's a piece of whimsy, but whimsy that doesn't interfere with the user journey. It doesn't actually impede the understanding of what's happening, but it's quite cute and it's quite sweet and it's quite lovely. It does apply to hardware as well. So here's one of my favourite Macs of all time. This is a Macintosh Classic 2, or same design used for the Macintosh Classic. And there's a whole range of computers based around the same basic format, same basic formula. Obviously the original Macintosh, the Fat Mac, the 512K, the Mac SE, a whole bunch of these compact Macs. But this one is for me the best because it is a real distillation, a concentration of that design. But importantly, when Apple was refining and concentrating the design down to its essentials, one of the things they didn't throw out was the personality of the design. And that's because the personality wasn't something laid on top that could be thrown away when it was decided it was needed. It was baked in, it was part of the very fabric of the design. And this little thing is packed full of personality, even though it doesn't in any real sense look like a face. It's very easy to anthropomorphize it and to see it as a little face with the screen tilted up towards you, ready to play. Someone commented in one of my articles when I wrote about this to say it reminded them of a bust of Caesar, which it does rather, the colouring and the angle and the tilt. But it's packed full of personality, but that personality was integral to the design. Here's another one. This is the Newton eMate 300 from Apple, which reminds me of nothing quite so much as the time in computing when not all computers look the same. Today everything follows the same basic form factor, and we see commonality in materials. Everything tends to look very, very similar. But in this case, we had a computer that was made of transparent green plastic. And if you said, make a computer of transparent green plastic, you'd think somebody was crazy or maybe worked for Alienware. But what you've got instead here is something that is really fantastic looking thing, really exciting looking bit of technology. However, the point I want to make here is not actually the hardware design, but it's the audio design, what you might call the Foley work of the OS. Have a listen to this. And the thing that really delights me about this, apart from the fact that there's lots of different sounds for different interaction levels, is that the base interaction level, everything on the same sort of hierarchy, in most computer systems you'd get click, 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 click as you tapped around it. But with Newton OS, you get beep, bok, bok, beep, bok, beep, bok, bok, beep, as you tap around. And you might worry about that as a developer, because you might think the user would infer, because they were getting different audio feedback from what they were doing, they might infer that in fact different things were happening, but that doesn't actually happen. You get this cheery little burble coming from the machine, and it just makes it sound much more alive, much more friendly, much more analog and human, and just generally much more delightful. Here's an example from the more recent days of the Mac, and some of you might remember this. This is when you first set up a Mac, turned it on for the very first time, you'd be greeted with something like this. To the starting up of a new computer. It doesn't really fulfill a practical purpose. Technically it does, and as my wife pointed out, one thing it does do is it shows you that the computer is working, which is not to be taken lightly. This idea that the speakers work and the screen works and everything's running. But really, there's nothing particularly practical about this. But it gives a sense of occasion, a sense of excitement, and with those big whooshy graphics coming in, more importantly for me, seeing different languages coming in, making me feel like I was a citizen of Earth kind of thing, and just feeling commonality with everyone all over the world. That was quite an exciting thing, and for a long time you got different variants of that coming up on different Macs as you booted them. So if you are thinking about adding some personality to your products, I've got some not really do's and don'ts for you, more just don'ts. And the first one is, it's a very bad idea to add personality as a rhyme, a layer on top of something, especially if that something is otherwise serious. If you're making important stock-taking app, then personality is probably not the best way of solving the problem of engaging your users. Terry Pratchett famously defined the difference between something that's erotic and something that's kinky as the difference between using a feather and using a chicken. And that's very relevant here. Very often we see things that are wacky, they're crazy for the sake of being crazy. And that's usually a very, very bad idea. The personality you imbue in your product should be subtle and tasteful and intelligent. But if it's wacky, it's probably just going to irritate more people than it pleases. Obviously, any personality you add ought not to interfere with the user experience, the user journey, and be especially careful of introducing personality at a point when people are predisposed to be angry anyway, as we saw with Chrome. Finally, if you're having second thoughts, it's probably a good indicator that you shouldn't be doing this, that it's something that isn't right for your product, or that you worry you haven't got the tone or the taste for to make work well. So consult with other people to try to engage them with that. And that's basically it. Just have a think about the idea of adding personality back into your products, because we have lost it. We've lost this playfulness and delight from a lot of what we produce as a species, as an industry, and I think it has a role in making our technology more approachable, more friendly, and generally more delightful. Thank you.